Welcome back, everybody, to another Purpose Served podcast episode. It's your legendary host, Darryl Wingfield. We back with another special one for y'all. This one is actually special. I said it about all of them because I really do be believing that, it's special. But before I get into it, for those that's new to this podcast is simply about inspiring you to be the best version that you could possibly be by taking action towards your dreams and aspirations and living off the two greatest commandments, which is to love the Lord, your God, everything you have, all your might, and to love your neighbor as you love yourself. So this is going to be pretty dense, but it's very, very important on why this is going to be dense. So, this is going to lead into a series of everything that I've been working on for the last couple of years. The stuff that I've been working on is centered around a whole bunch of stuff. And I got finished reading the book Aion by Carl Jung, somebody that I mention here on this podcast all the time, who was a psychoanalyst. But a quote that I read today sums up what I've been working on and where my mind has been at. And we're going to work through it all. We are going to be going through a lot of stuff, and it's going to be extremely dense. But my goal, the end goal for me, is to point you towards yourself and to ultimately point you back to God, and to realize that everything emanates from one source. Everything. And a quote that I read today, and this is coming from the book Aion, paragraph 413. And the quote says, "Psyche and matter exist in one and the same world, and each partakes of the other. Otherwise, any reciprocal action would be impossible." This world that we're living in has a twofold nature. The world that we're living in is a spiritual one, and the world that we live in is also a physical one. So, throughout the years, I've been greatly thinking about this. And the starting point with me thinking about this is ideas. The question that I asked myself was, how do you go from ideas to results? How do you get what's in your head and heart and express that to the world? How do you do that? And along this line of questioning, I realized a lot. It pointed me to the universal. It sent me a lot along the lines of, in a lot of different worlds and through a lot of different timelines. Most importantly, another thing I was asking myself is, what is the absolute truth? And you hear a lot all the time that truth is relative. But I've been asking myself, what is the absolute truth? And what I've come to realize is that purpose is unseen, is logic behind it, and by definition is reasoning behind it. And it must make its way from that unseen, intangible to the seen and to the tangible. The frame of reference that I've been using for all of this has been symbolic with shapes to start off with. The starting point, yet again, is a circle. I spoke on this a while ago, probably like 2 years ago, I believe, or last year. But this is just a reminder for anybody that's fairly new and tuning into this. I've been seeing you guys showing support, and I would greatly appreciate it. But it's been a circle. Circle, I've come to realize, represents unity. Circle represents wholeness, and circle represents uniting opposites that was once split. But by its original nature, it was one in itself. There's secular references to this, but there's also biblical references to this as well. And we're going to be doing, like I said, a breakdown of all of this. And you guys are going to be walking through this along this journey with me. But when I first started thinking about this stuff and these revelations and insights was hitting me left and right, it was so much going on inside of my head. But there was also a lot going on around me. I felt discombobulated in my life. I also felt as though I was getting extremely close to figuring something very, very important out that was essential to my being. But it also felt as though it was essential to the being of the human race. That sounds so drastic, but I'm being so serious, like being so dead serious. A circle also represents wholeness, if I didn't say that. And spiritually speaking, people want a circle, but they're boxed in. And when you think about a box, essentially in a two-dimensional, that shape would be a square instead of a circle. This is all relevant, to be quite honest, based off of the things that I've researched and came to realize when it comes to these shapes. And with the square, it represents the physical dimension. And with the circle, it represents the spiritual one. We're going to be talking about the squaring of the circle. And this has has alchemical stuff in it and all of that, but I necessarily don't want to focus on that. But I've found examples personally in the things that I was working on. One of the things that I was working on was, man, my cat is like going crazy out there. But one of the things that I was working on is the stages of intention to start this off. Hopefully I can build a foundation before this get cut off. Like I said, this is going to turn into a series automatically. But we're going to call this introducing the monad. But the stages of intention was a breakdown that I use symbolically using a circle. And if you guys are watching this video, I'm going to put it somewhere like around here or whatever. Probably right there. But the 4 stages of intention is creation, preparation, behavior, and setting. And within those 4 stages, you got transitory things in between. So for the creation, in order for your idea, which is the starting point at the top of the circle, to make his way down into something that's expressible and tangible, you have to plan it out. And that's a part of that second stage of intention, which is the preparation stage. After this plan, you must have behaviors to bring this idea out from the creation stage, from the preparation stage to the behavior stage, which is associated with actions. And now we're at the bottom of the circle. And to the left of the circle is the setting stage, where this is the place where your idea is going to be maturated through your actions. And then that's going to make your idea come full circle and right back to the top. Once you align your plan with your behavior, but with your action and a place that it has to be, it brings all of it full circle. That's one example of squaring a circle. And that is, and this is another term that I'm going to be stealing from Carl Jung, and you're going to be hearing me say this a lot, is a quaternity, which basically means a grouping of four. There's countless examples spiritually of the grouping of four, biblically of the grouping of four, and secularly of the grouping of four. Examples that I can give of this is the Garden of Eden and the four rivers that lead out from the Garden of Eden. And I think the pronunciation of it is Pison, Gihon, Hiddekel, and the Euphrates River. But there still is a central point where all four of these is drifting off. Another four, a grouping of four in a quaternity for a biblical reference, is the Gospels that start the New Testament of the Bible, which is Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Another one is of the living creatures seen in Ezekiel's vision, which is of the man, which was facing frontwardly, the lion, which was face was on the right, the ox, which face was on the left, and the eagle, face was on the back. They was one living creature. That's another example of four coming together from that one. Those was biblical examples, also spiritual ones. Secular ones that I can use, for example, is of the cardinal directions: north, south, east, and west. Another one is of the elements: air, water, fire, earth. What is another one? States of matter. That can be a trinity, but you can also make that a quaternity as well, with gas, liquids, solids, and plasma. There's a trinity as well in things. You got God the Father, God the Son, and the Holy Spirit as a trinity. Also, for purpose served, there's a concept that I called awareness and motion, which is associated with the building blocks and the foundation for having your ideas going to results. Awareness and motion has to do with your vision, your journey, and the destination that it will take you on. And using the basic foundation of what I'm talking about, one is in the unseen, one is in the seen, and another one operates in between the two, the unseen and seen. So purpose is associated with the vision, because that's has to do with reasoning. And reasoning is of a mental faculty, and that's something that you can't see. The next level to purpose is goals. Serve your purpose. Take action towards your goals. Goals, would be associated to a aim. It's pointing you in a certain direction. And all living things are pointed to a certain direction in order for it to thrive or survive. And then service. The actual action being taken for the goals through whatever the purpose actually is. So that is a grouping of three with those. So going back to shapes, purpose will be associated with a circle. Goals will be associated with a triangle, since triangles come to a point. And the service would be associated with a square, due to the fact that it grounds something. And think about the Great Pyramids as an example of this. Like I said, this is going to be a lot. You guys most likely going to have to re-listen to this. But this is me trying to build a foundation, because we're going to break down all of these things. But I have to lay this foundation first and foremost before we really get into the nitty-gritty of this stuff. Most people are stuck in that square, like I said, and they're stuck on the ground level, and they're looking to elevate above what's on the surface. But most people don't like to sink into who they are and the essence of what's intangible within them. The real you is not tangible, it's intangible, and the real you is invisible. You can't physically see you, but yet you are. And the real question is that most people have a problem with and are struggling with is, who are you? But your psyche and matter are one and the same thing. One precedes the other. And hopefully through me going through all of this, you come to an understanding that you are a spiritual being having a physical experience. So, goals, aims, that is that in between. And that also is a part of that Trinity. And goals help you take what's intangible and bring it down to what's tangible. Depending on what your ideas, it get locked into your behavior. Most people have a disconnect with expressing themselves based off of what their goals are, based off of where they think their purpose lie. And if you think your purpose lie outside of you, it's going to be extremely hard to make yourself whole. The Trinity aspect that I would like to point to when it comes to goals is associated with Saint Isaac the Syrian as a great example to make this spiritual. Saint Isaac the Syrian pointed out that there's 3 degrees of knowledge, and the first being of the body, the second being of the soul, and the third being of the spirit. One is physical, one is spiritual. The body is physical and the spirit is spiritual, but they go hand in hand with each other, and your soul is in between the two of those things. So the goal is to get your body aligned with your spirit and get your spirit aligned with your body. One is pointing to life and the other one is pointing to death. Which brings me to another relationships outside of unity, which is oneness, trinity, which is a state of 3, and quaternity, which is a state of 4. But this next one is duality. This is where tension comes from with most people. Oh, before I get on to that, seasons is another great quaternity example of summer, fall, winter, and spring. It's a great quaternity example. But duality, the splitting of ultimately two things: physical and spiritual. That's a duality. Male and female, that's a duality. Something that I've been speaking on like crazy as of late is light and dark. That's a duality. Good and evil, that's a duality. Left and right, that's a duality. Up and down, that's a duality. In order for you to get over that hump to wholeness, you have to unite with split in its core. And the duality between that, psychologically speaking, is what's conscious and unconscious. And you have to make what's unconscious in you conscious in order for you to elevate your experience with being a human being. A biblical reference to this duality, especially when it comes to physical and spiritual, is the first line in the Bible. And the first line in the Bible is God, which is that unity, created the heavens and the earth. I always highlight the specific order of how that's worded. And how that's worded is heavens and the earth. God created the spiritual and he created the physical. The spiritual was created before the physical. But the nature of our body, biblically speaking, is we were made from the dust of the ground. We was made from the earth. So there's a relationship of God coming down to us and us going up to God. That's a duality reference and something to look at. Something that I also figured out, well, discovered, not figured it out, because it's like all of this stuff is very, very observable if you pay close attention to how the world naturally works. Is another duality is of your own senses and the body. Your eyes is the body part that's physical, intangible, but your sight is intangible. Smell is intangible, but your nose is tangible. What you hear is intangible sound, and your ears is the tangible thing. Taste, and that's intangible, but your mouth and your tongue is that tangible thing that allows for that taste. And touch, the sensation of touch is one of those things that's in between the two. And that requires your hands, or that requires your whole entire body. These are tangible and intangible, but some of them are clearly separated from each other. How I separate the two? Also, when thinking about this, you got, like I said, that was the body and senses. But in the grand scheme of things, in the macrocosm and the microcosm of our experience, you have the natural world, which is everything that came into being before human beings ever existed. So that being the universe and the earth. And then you had the personal world, which is our minds, and then our bodies. And I diagram this in a way where there's cones. There, for the natural world, there is a cone that's pointing downwards, and at the top of the cone, the circle on the top of the cone is white, and when it's starting to single down and come to a point, it's black, and it's a small circle at the bottom. And then the bottom half of that connecting piece to this diagram is the personal world, which is the mind, which is another small circle and a white cone with the bottom widening out to a black circle with body being at the bottom, which is a way of uniting those opposites. That's a duality aspect. Something that I want to point to when it comes to the earth as well is the three kingdoms on this planet. That being the mineral kingdom, that being the vegetable kingdom, and that being the animal kingdom. And I said it in that particular order for a reason. A botanist by the name of Carl Jung is the person that I realized this from. And without the mineral kingdom, you can't get the vegetable kingdom. And without the vegetable kingdom, you can't get the animal kingdom. The mineral kingdom represents growth. The vegetable kingdom represents growth and life. And the animal kingdom represents growing, living, and feeling. And they all go hand in hand with each other, but that's also a grouping of three, which is a trinity. But yet again, the biggest thing is to point you guys back to what's whole and what is the single unit within you that you was made out of. Religion and science tell the same story. Religion, and I'm a Christian by faith, tells the story that everything was a byproduct of God, and God stands outside of the creation of the universe, and the universe is of his creation. But when you say universe, you're thinking of one thing that has manyfoldness within it, but it's still stemming from one thing. And the Big Bang, from a scientist's perspective, is everything emanated from a singularity that was infinitely dense and infinitely hot, and it expanded everywhere at one given time. So that's why I use the term called monad, because a monad is a single unit by Greek definition. Yet again, if I haven't already said it. So there's more that I'm going to be covering, because I did skip over a whole lot of stuff. But the basis for this is, like I said, to get you guys to understand that mind detects mind plus mind detect matter. Mind over matter, honestly speaking. The one thing that I've been recognizing is people are leaning so much towards the physical that is creating a spiritual imbalance within themselves. To the point where, due to the fact that we have to label everything and categorize everything, it takes away from our human essence. And the human essence is to live a good life. That's what God intended creation to experience, is to live a good life. There's beauty built into life naturally. There's order built into life naturally. It's not chaotic. I truly believe that this is not random, but the randomness only comes from our lack of understanding and our own ignorance to what's really going on. So at the end of the day, you have to reunite your opposites. You have to reunite your dark side by simply bringing the light to the darkness. And by doing so, you're going to overcome that darkness. And some of that darkness that you think is darkness is actually light that's looking to be lived out, because it's simply hidden potential and not something that should be repressed. That's a part of your authenticity and a part of what makes you authentic and different from every single human being that ever came before you. It makes you different from every human being that's going to come after you. But get to know yourself. And by getting to know yourself, you're going to get to know the Creator within you and recognize the image of God within you, your imago Dei, and realize that you are already one within a body. And specifically, you're one within the body of Christ, and you're one within the body of truth. Deception is at an all-time high right now because people are geared to look at darkness and cast themselves out into the outer darkness instead of bringing themselves back within, which is of the original state before the fall. And we must return to the Garden of Eden, the Edenic state, back when everything was natural and we was being what we were truly meant to be as human beings. People fight against that, and people much rather be divided in their beliefs and be divided in what they think and know to be true. Hopefully, I'm inviting wholeness to your life, and hopefully, I'm opening up a door for you to be curious about the nature of God and the kingdom of heaven that came before this earth, that's ruled right now by the evil one himself. And don't have Satan be your dad. Don't have Satan be your father. This is a Luciferian world we living in right now. But turn towards the light inside of you and become whole and become one inside of you. So the next podcast episode, we're going to be talking about the building blocks and the foundation, which is associated with purpose, service, and goals. And going into an even deeper dive of how I made shapes out of that. Until next time, my people, I thank y'all for listening. Like I said, this was a lot. And if you're interested, if you're truly interested in seeing some of the diagrams that I've created, in the description of almost every single podcast episode that I've uploaded, I have the Miro app. And in this Miro app, I have it's essentially a mind map of what I've created throughout the years of ideas to results and notes on certain diagrams, and you're going to be able to see clearly of what I'm talking about. If you can't see and you're just simply hearing and you're lost in the sauce. But also, take everything that I say with a grain of salt and live life from the center of your being. And don't get caught on any sides of the square. Remember, be dead middle of the circle. Get to the point. Reach the bullseye. And by doing that, you serving your purpose. So I'll reach the end of this podcast episode. Thank y'all for holding in. If y'all tuned in for this long. And if you do have any questions, please shoot me an email. That's also in the description as well about anything. Love y'all. Last but not least, listen to the two greatest commandments and to love the Lord your God and to love your neighbor as you love yourself. I'm out of here. Deuces.